Hi folks, let's talk a little bit about ultraviolet light. Now we've been talking about the electromagnetic spectrum. Visible light has just a little bit longer in wavelength than visible light is going to be the infrared. Then we have visible light, and then shorter than visible light we have the ultraviolets. Now ultraviolet is in itself, in the same way that visible light has Roy G. Biv, it has a collection of different wavelengths. This ultraviolet light has a collection of different wavelengths. The wavelengths of ultraviolet that are very close to visible are called UVA. The middle of the ultraviolet spectrum is called UVB, and the end that's right next to X-rays is called UVC. So all ultraviolet light is not considered equal in strength and in quantity. Ultraviolet light is shorter in wavelength than visible light, and it is a form of ionizing radiation, which means that it can actually hurt you. Now, UVA, these that are right close to visible light, UVA wavelengths, these are the ones that if you spend a lot of time out in the sun, they can add to aging, age lines, they can add to wrinkles. But typically, these are not the primary source of an awful lot of skin cancer. UVB is burning. B stands for burning. These are the wavelengths that have enough energy that when they penetrate down to those more base layers where your skin cells are being produced, they possibly can cause mutations. And those mutations can lead to cancers. And as your skin is just being overexposed to radiation, sunlight radiation, it actually burns. Ultraviolet C are very, very high energy, which means they could be very, very damaging. But the good news is they are so high energy that very few UVCs are going to make it through the upper atmosphere down to where you are basking in the sun, because of the fact that they are going to be absorbed by a lot of the atmosphere before they actually get to you. So these are the ones that are the most damaging. When you look for a sunscreen to buy, make sure that it has UVB on it, or a lot of them will say something about broad spectrum protection, because you want not just one, but all of these to keep them away from your skin to protect yourself from potential challenges. Now, usage of ultraviolet light, besides just giving you a nice tan, because they're high enough energy that they can actually kill germs, and this can be used to sterilize things. This is a really cool little gizmo where there is an ultraviolet light, and then there is a tube where water is passed around the light bulb. They're isolated, of course, so you don't get some sort of a shock. But as the water gets passed in the tubing around the ultraviolet light, the water is sterilized because of the fact that the high energy ultraviolet light will kill germs and bacteria and things like that. It can be used in spas. It can be used in high school chemistry labs. You might have had a goggles cabinet in your chemistry lab where you would put the goggles in between usages, and very often then the instructor would close the door and turn on a little knob on the side, bathe the goggles with ultraviolet light. Now, it would not clean the goggles, it wouldn't take the fingerprints off, but what it would do is if there's any bacteria or fungus, it would definitely kill any microorganisms. So they are safe for the next group of students to use. This is kind of a cool collection of pictures. Bees, insects, many of them actually see in the ultraviolet. And this was discovered a handful of years ago, and flowers had a whole bunch of extra cool patterns that were not visible to the naked eye. And investigators looked at it and went, why in the world would a flower evolve all these wild and crazy patterns that could not be seen by insects? Then they did some research and found that bees and assorted other pollinators can actually see in the ultraviolet part of the spectrum. And so the bees could actually see this. We humans cannot. And that would be a big target that said, come pollinate me. Vitamin D is produced in your body when you are exposed to ultraviolet light. Now, you don't have to be exposed to an awful lot of it, but my mom, when I was a kid, used to call this the sunshine vitamin, and she would yell at me to go outside and play and get my vitamin D. And your body will produce vitamin D with a little exposure to ultraviolet light. If you get fancy nail polish and you go to the salon and then they put your hands under ultraviolet light to cure that nail polish, that's one of the ways UV light can be used. There are ultraviolet strips that are put into money to help prevent counterfeiting. Ultraviolet light is used all over the place. There are cabinets and things that can be used in spas. They can put nice wet spa towels in there. And if you have a wet, moist environment, oh, that is just inviting bacterial growth. But if you keep them in a cabinet with ultraviolet radiation, well, it's just going to sterilize them so you have a nice warm spa towel without that potential for fungus or bacteria. It can sometimes be used to treat psoriasis and eczema. So ultraviolet light, which has a bad rap for doing damage to skin, can actually be used in a medical situation by a trained professional to actually improve the quality of skin. But you have to be careful because there's always that danger of skin damage or skin cancer. So any high-level exposure to ionizing radiation, what it can do is your DNA is stuck together by tiny little wimpy hydrogen bonds. If you want to get an idea of how weak a hydrogen bond is any kind of a bond that can basically be undone really easily. Two of my favorite examples of hydrogen bonds, one is when I curl my hair. If I curl my hair, I'm hydrogen bonding it. If I get my hair wet, the curl goes away and you end up with just plain old hydrogen bonds that have been broken. Another example of a hydrogen bond is if you have eyes, I hope you have eyes, and you wear a contact lens. What keeps your contact next to your eyes? Well, that's a tiny little layer of water. And that bond between the contact lens and your eye is that weak little bond, which is a hydrogen bond. At the end of the day, when you take your contacts out, you put those in your little cleaning solution. They're not hard to get out, but what holds them in all day is these hydrogen bonds. Well, these wimpy little hydrogen bonds hold our DNA molecules together. And if a piece of ionizing radiation would come in and cause one of these tiny little strands of DNA to change, and you end up with a copying change when a cell reproduces, you have the potential for a mutation and a cancer. And overexposure, long-term exposure to any kind of ionizing radiation, you increase your chances of skin cancer. And skin cancer, this is a picture of a skin cancer. There's lots of different kinds. This is the nasty melanoma kind. And when in doubt, go see the doc. It's kind of always a good idea. All right, there's an overview of ultraviolet, and we'll come back with our last one on the highest energy